Welcome back to our coverage of the macroeconomic numbers. We just have the big GDP number that has hit the screens, and it is a bit of a disappointment at 13.5%. The CNBC-TV18 poll stood at 15%, and the Reserve Bank estimate or forecast was 16.2%. Soumyakanti Ghosh, the Chief Economic Advisor of State Bank of India, was explaining to us that at this rate, even if the other quarters remained as per the Reserve Bank forecast, we could be ending the year at 6.7% and not at 7.2%, as is the Reserve Bank's current forecast. We've been speaking with Kaushik Das of Deutsche Bank, Anubhuti Sahai of Standard Chartered Bank, D.K. Joshi of CRISIL, and Soumyakanti Ghosh of State Bank of India. Mr. Joshi, did you have time to go through the numbers? Any further comments?
Well, I think what I see in the numbers is also some sort of normalization, because the sectors which were lagging, for instance, private consumption to GDP has gone back to 59%. So which means this has grown. So this was one of the lagging segments, I think, in 21-22. I think this from the demand side. So that normalization is taking place. And second is, I think, from the supply side, the normalization of contact-based services. I think so. In a way, I think the growth may be a little lower than what we expected, but I think the unevenness in growth is somewhat reducing. I think because this quarter was not functionally disrupted by COVID.
Okay. Soumya, could you go through the numbers a little more closely? From the expenditure side, is there any big disappointment in terms of private final consumption expenditure or capital formation?
No, if I look into the numbers carefully, on the expenditure side, I think the gross fixed capital formation actually have grown at a decent 20% odd.
Yes. And
the private final consumption expenditure has grown at around 25.9%. And the government final consumption expenditure actually is stagnating, is almost 1.3%, which is basically not grown at all. The important point to note over here is that if you actually look, and the overall nominal GDP is around, if I look at, it's 26.7% in the first quarter, and with a deflator of around, I think, 12.6%. The important point to know is that if you look into the deflator sector-wise, I think the disappointment has come in the mining sector, and I think it's primarily because of the significant inflationary trends in the first quarter, the commodity price cycle, which has possibly dented the performance in this sector. But as I emphasize, the core GVA has expanded at 12.2%, which is basically excluding the government, and which was 24.6% in last quarter, in the previous quarter in the Q1 FY22. So if I take all these factors into account, my sense is that this number is clearly a disappointment, because there was, before this number came out, I think there was two sides of the story. I think the side was that the number could actually outshine the RBI expectation of 7.2%, and the other side was that it could be falling short of that. I think that trend is now clearly visible, that the growth rate this year, I mean, if we get 7.2% becomes the upper bound now. And I think all numbers is likely to be revised downwards, because as I explained, at the same rate, it will be just touching maybe 7% or below, even if there is an improvement in the numbers in the subsequent quarters.
Okay. Fair point, Soumya. And I just want to alert that, when you look at private final consumption expenditure, if we can have that number on the board, that looks like it is, 25% higher than last year. But, last year already was a maimed quarter. We were just recovering from the year ago, which was a very bad quarter, the 2020 quarter. So the correct normal quarter we should be comparing ourselves with should be the 2019 first quarter, April, May, June. And at that time, private final consumption expenditure was 20 lakh crore. This is 2019. We are now at 2022, and it is 22 lakh crore. So it's just about 10% higher over 3 years. So it's not a very good recovery. And that's what Soumyakanti Ghosh is pointing out too. That, the numbers look very big if you look at it only from year ago levels. But year ago was a partial recovery from a terrible base of 2020. And therefore, if you looked at a 3-year compounded growth, then this does not go in as a very robust quarter. Kaushik Das, any further comments from the numbers that you have?
So, Latha, if there is no revision, and you confirm that, and Shomo also pointed to that,
Yes.
then the manufacturing of below 5% YOY is disappointing. It should have been higher, and that is where the weakness is. Otherwise, you should have got a higher number as per GBA is concerned. Now, the thing is, the way to analyze this particular quarter's data is more on a sequential basis, quarter on quarter, rather than looking at year on year. Year on year will not give you the whole story. And given the volatility in GDP data, I think 13 to 15% growth range, we should not, look into too much details and trying to think like why it is down a little bit here and there, because India's GDP data can be very volatile, and we can have revisions later, and we can be, anywhere in that particular range.
Okay.
So as far as the range is concerned, with what you had as consensus and what we've got, 13.5 to 15%, I think doesn't change the narrative that, we are in a sequential kind of up move in April, June compared to January, March.
Correct.
But as we head more into the second half of the fiscal year, growth will start slowing down, and more so in FY24 as RBI's rate hikes start impacting, as the global economy slows down more. So seen from that perspective, I think it is also with respect to what expectations each person had with respect to this forecast. Like I had 14%, so I'm not that greatly disappointed. I got 13.5. And our FY23 growth forecast is 7.1%. So I think that is broadly in line with what Anubhuti said.
Okay. So
you
are
still have 7%,
Kaushik,
7.1%.
yeah, Kaushik, I just want quick comments from everyone on whether you will change your full year forecast. Soumya, you think you might at this moment change your forecast, right?
Yes, our forecast will be revised. We'll look at the numbers closely.
Okay.
So there will be a downward revision in our forecast.
Fair enough. That should be, let's see what the Reserve Bank itself has to say when they present their data ahead of the next policy. Dr. Joshi, will you be revising it either ways?
Well, it does create a downside bias, but we'll have to do the math before we come out with a number.
Fair point. So downward bias from two experts. Anubhuti, yourself?
We'll maintain 7% growth.
Okay,
that
7.
looks pretty good to us till now.
Kaushik, you're standing at 7.1 and you don't change.
No, I mean, I think it's broadly in line, and no need. And next quarter, we are looking at 6% and then 5%, 4.5%. So it's broadly in line with our forecast.
Okay, so your second half is stronger than what the Reserve Bank expects, and therefore you think we will make up what we have lost in the first quarter. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Soumya, Mr. Joshi, Kaushik and Anubhuti, thank you very much for staying up for us on a holiday, and a very important holiday in Mumbai, and analysing the numbers for us. To summarize, the numbers are a disappointment. They are lower than the CNBC-TV18 poll, which itself at 15% was lower than the RBI projection of 16.2%. And the experts believe, Soumya Ghosh in particular, that if you go with this kind of a number, first quarter number, the full year GDP number may have to be revised below 7%, probably 6.7 or thereabouts. Mr. Joshi also believes there's going to be a downward bias. Anubhuti and Kaushik Das are standing at around 7%, and they may not revise the number. But there is a very good chance that this year we may not make it to the 7% mark, which is a bit of a scare. The other scare, of course, is that there could be a global slowdown. China's not picking up as much as was expected, and the US also could slow down, going by the pace of rate hikes that Jerome Powell is talking about at Jackson Hole. If there is that kind of a global slowdown, then perhaps 7% could be a challenge for other reasons as well. The first one being the arithmetic challenge posed by the first quarter. So we wrap up on the note that the GDP numbers are slightly disappointing. Thank you very much for watching. There's lots of news and updates lined up for you.